Maya has its own scripting language called Mel, Maya's embedded language. We can preview some of that by going Windows, General Editors, Script Editor. And everything you do in Maya, in fact, is a Mel command. If I create a sphere, you'll see we get some feedback here, and this here is the Mel command. If I just copy and paste that, you can see that we can change some options like the radius here. And if I execute that again, I get a second sphere that is bigger. This is one of the nice things about Maya, is that Mel is fed back into the script editor, and you can kind of hack it and do stuff. But what is Mel used for, really? Well, in Maya, as we know, there's a bunch of nodes. So Mel is really used for creating nodes or getting rid of them and changing some attributes on them. So remember, in Maya, attributes aren't sort of geometry properties. Attributes are in fact properties of the nodes here, or as Houdini would call them, is parameters. For example, if I select the polysphere node here, and I actually click select, so I select this node, I can go to add attributes and add an attribute. Let's call this test. Click add, and if I open up add attributes, there's my test attribute there, and I can just store some data within that. So this is kind of how Maya stores data. You'd create attributes on a node, and you can kind of store your data there and refer to it back with Mel commands here. And look, you can see that we've set the attribute there to a value. So if I hack that command and just change this to 50, you can see I can run this command here, and it changes that value back to 50. So we can use Mel commands to update and change sort of arbitrary attributes and stuff, and store the data on the nodes as attributes, rather than sort of point or geometric data, which is kind of how Houdini does it. The other use for sort of Mel is a bit of expressions. So we can also write an expression to control stuff. So let me just right click and choose create new expression, and this brings up the expression editor in Maya, and I can say something like the translate y equals the sine of time. Let's just multiply that by 3, just as a bit faster. Let me hit create, and there we go, we've created an expression, and that's created some animation, and we can build behaviors in with our expressions here. So let's just pop over to Houdini and sort of have a look at Houdini's expressions. So in Houdini we can do very, very similar things. We don't have really Mel so much as we have Vex. We'll have a look at Vex in a minute. Vex actually does create data and manipulate the geometry, but we're actually going to manipulate the point data. This is where we store stuff in Houdini actually as attributes on points. These on the nodes themselves are parameters, and like Maya actually, we can control the parameters with expressions to create animation. So just like we did in Mel, I'm actually going to use a scripting language called HScript. This is not the same as Vex, or to be confused, although it's quite similar. You can obviously use Python as well. If you click on this little H here, you can actually switch between the language that we're using, and you can see we are actually using HScript. And that's a very similar syntax to Mel, in fact. So again, if I just put a sine function in, this time I'm going to use a variable called $ff, which is the frame. So let's multiply this by 3 to speed that up as well. So that's using the frame number this time. And you can see we've created an expression that also moves or animates geometry in a very similar way.